Thank you, Dr. Prince, and thank you all for participating. And great to catch up with my friend Chauncey Parker. We'll jump right into it. As Deputy Mayor for Public Safety under the Eric Adams administration, you were part of an administration's leadership. They spent a lot of time finding and seizing illegal guns. What were the pluses and minuses of that approach?
Well, I would say this, the way I look at really every goal in government is to start with what's the goal. And I think the goal, and this is the lens I've always looked at when it comes to public safety, is that our goal, our North Star, is to keep people safe, and particularly keep people safe from gun violence. And that's really about as important as anything that government can do. And we need to figure out, sort of ideologically, we have to be agnostic about how we go about doing that. But I think the North Star, the key question is, does this reduce gun violence? So part of that strategy of interdicting guns, I think, is an important part of it. But I think we have to keep our perspective that I think there are 400 million guns in America. Right now, there are 400 million guns. You can buy guns, ghost guns on the internet. You can get a 3D printer. So stopping the flow of guns is a part of it, but I think that really the work has to be done on the ground. I think the work that I've been involved in, and the director of our program here from the NYPD, Lisa Kubert, is here. I think the project we've had, and this started actually under Mayor de Blasio and has gone on for now almost 5 years. I think the most important work we've done is called the Gun Violence Strategies Partnership. That was a project that started in August of 2021. And the goal was to say, the goal is that nobody gets shot in New York City. That's what our North Star is. And there's lots of ways we can do it. We can do it through prisoner reentry. We can do it through diversion programs. We can do it lots of ways. But one thing we know is that there are a very small number of people who are repeatedly involved in gun violence, and they're passing through the criminal justice system. What would happen if everybody in law enforcement worked together when that happens, when somebody who's committed a gunpoint robbery in the Bronx, and while they're out on that gunpoint robbery, they get arrested in Manhattan for a gunpoint robbery? More often than not, they can get out on bail. What would happen if everybody in law enforcement, all 5 DAs, the US attorneys, city corrections, federal, everybody got together, and we would meet every morning at 10 o'clock before arraignment, and we would compare notes and share and try to build the strongest case possible. In New York City, that's about 2 people a day. It's not 50 that people may imagine it, but 2 people who are repeatedly involved in gun violence who get arrested. Today, that partnership had our 1,091st meeting in a row. So if you think, I've been doing this for 40 years, for 1,000 days in a row, every single day at 10 o'clock, every single person in law enforcement meets with this common North Star, shares information. Gun violence is led by the NYPD and all their partners. Gun violence is down, to the historic, so low that we're now counting days in a row that people aren't shot, days in a row that people aren't murdered, to historically low numbers. What I find so exciting about that is that it's a model that could be applied to all our challenges in government. It could be applied to the severely mentally ill. It could be applied to people coming home from prison. It could be applied from a perspective of what do we do the first time a young person is arrested for a robbery? Where is that meeting? Not enforcement, but it's about government collaboration. So my point is, I think that gun interdiction is important, but really what's most important is what's practically most important on the ground in the city of New York.
What is it that allowed that to happen? Because those different stakeholding groups, it includes elected officials who have inevitably somewhat political considerations, federal, different levels of government who come with different directives. Was there a command from on high to make sure you're part of this meeting, or?
No, I think that, well, what happened is it was an experiment at the time under Mayor de Blasio, Commissioner Shea. It was an experiment and asking all our partners, the DA partners, and it's every federal, state, and local law enforcement partner, 25 different partners, and said, let's just try this for 90 days. Gun violence had all of a sudden gone completely in the wrong direction for our city after so much progress. And it was an agreement really built on relationships and trust, and let's try this and see this works, but let's try this for 90 days and see how it goes. And what holds it together, I think, which is so fascinating, is not a government grant. that says, oh, and we'll pay for this or we'll pay for that if you all work together, if you send people to this meeting. It's not an order saying you have to be at the meeting. What happens, I think what holds it together is people are absolutely locked into a common North Star. And that's why I say it's so transferable to every challenge that we face. Our common North Star is to support the people who are severely mentally ill, to support young people who never, to get them out of the criminal justice system before they get into the criminal justice system. But it's finding in government people who share a common North Star, and then really working together, be very, very efficient and effective at that meeting. It starts exactly at 10 o'clock to the second. Whether it's a 20-minute meeting or a 40-minute meeting, it is on point. And I think that's what holds it together.
Very interesting. How do violence interrupters fit into the city's strategy, or did it fit into the city's strategy when you were deputy mayor?
I think violence interrupters or the crisis management system is hugely important. My personal view is I think that they're underutilized because they have a way of reaching. They're very, very passionate in the work that they do, like many, many other public servants. They have a way of reaching people that are sometimes we're not able to reach them, but they really can reach them in a credible way. And so I think they're vital. I just think we could do more where we could bring them in to all of us looking at the same map at the same time with the same goal, because we sometimes retreat into our silos. But I think they're absolutely vital to it. I think the path forward, for example, I would say what I think of the crisis management system is you think about what is the strategy for a young person under the age of 21 who's shot. We know the data will tell us that that's huge warning sign of that young person is going to end up in prison, that person is going to end up dead. Very, very bad sign, right? So I think, and there are hospitals, I think Northwell is one of the key partners of this and others, but I think if you took someone someone from the crisis management system and you really empowered them, and all of government said, not only are you going to meet this person where they are and try to build a bridge, but you have the entire keys to the kingdom of New York City government, because they also need housing. They also need food. They also need support in many, many different ways. But you treated them like navigators and put the four corners of government to support them. I think that would be really important. And I think the same thing in terms of our intervention strategies on the street. They can be they are, and I think they could even be more effective if we all work together and looked at the same map at the same time.
This is just something I've been wondering about for a long, long time. Gun buybacks. I happen to go to a church in Brooklyn where they hold the record for the most buybacks in one day, and they work with the district attorney, and it's never a bad idea to talk about reducing violence, turning in weapons, and so forth. But is there hard data to support that as a strategy for reducing violence?
I think it'd be interesting to measure what are you trying to accomplish with a gun buyback. I think they're important, but I don't think they're necessarily important that a buyback of 150 guns is going to reduce the supply because there's millions of guns. I always thought that gun buybacks were really important because they build community. And I think that is one of the best antidotes to a lot of the challenges that we face if we come together as a community, block by block, and we lock arms and we work together. And gun buybacks have that, usually faith-led, always community-led. So I think if we look at it, we may be measuring it through the same, does gun violence go up or down because of it? I don't know in terms of the particular guns that are turned in, but I do think that it's a community building event, and there's nothing like that as a strategy. When I say it's another kind of example like that, one of the projects we're involved in is called the Harlem Field of Dreams. So that is taking a dirt field in Harlem on 143rd to 145th and Lenox. The Brigadier General Charles Young, the Jackie Robinson of American military history. But this is a field that is just filled with, rat holes and dirt, and and it's from a public health and from a public safety perspective really goes the exact opposite direction. We were able to take $8 million of asset forfeiture and other partners, and now this will open in April. But that's going to be the Harlem Field of Dreams. It's a beautiful synthetic turf field that will be filled with children, be filled with community members. That anything that builds community, I would put that as the most important thing we can do in terms of community development and also gun, very specifically gun violence prevention, but nothing more powerful than when we all come together.
We in the media have often reported on the so-called iron pipeline by which firearms come from low-regulated states in the South up to New York City. Is that something still worth addressing through litigation or legislation, do you think?
I just think it's complicated, and I would say it this way. There's so many guns. One, selling guns is legal. So in Georgia or Virginia or Pennsylvania, you can, there are 400 million guns on the street. The average, and this was surprising to me, the average time to crime. So when a gun is sold, to the time that it actually, it makes its way onto the streets of New York, whether it's a shooting or it's in somebody's waistband or whatever it is, but what would be called the time to crime, from the time of the sale to the time that it's recovered, on average is 8 years. I think that when we think of the iron pipeline, we thought that somebody just went up and then the next week that somebody went. So if there's 8 years that's passed, right. I just think it's this idea of being ideologically agnostic. What's the most important thing to do? It definitely is important to go after the gun trafficking routes that are hot and present and current and try to do something about that, and people buying multiple guns. But you really got to look at the ones that have been sold within the last year, and that's what ATF and NYPD do. Yeah. But it has to be laser focused.
When you say you're agnostic about the strategies, that's somewhat rare. Something I've noticed, because I do a lot of these kind of conversations, and I did two actually in the last year with the mayor of Baltimore, who's seen record low drops in violent crime and so forth, who had a fundamentally different strategy than what's being done in New York and some other places. And I understand enough about politics and politicians to know that, fine, everybody will get and probably should deserve credit for whatever it is that they're trying. But is there a consensus, or perhaps even a growing consensus among leaders of big cities in particular, that certain strategies are where we should be trying to push the whole nation?
I think that let me just say this about just what strategy works. To me, it's very simple. Our goal is to keep people safe. And we have to measure that not just by crime statistics, it's also, do people feel safe? But that's what our goal is. To be agnostic, nothing bold about saying that. Apple is not bold about saying they're trying to make the best iPhone. Right. If somebody's got a better way to make an iPhone, they're all welcome to the table. So we should be open to any idea. We should be open to, it's crime fighting when people come out of prison, and we make sure, one of the things we fund through our program is make sure people have a driver's license that doesn't say inmate. That's just common sense. Like, it would be great for people to have a job when they come home. So each of these fits into that. I think that where there's consensus around a couple of things. One is, or at least what I believe is, our goal is to keep people safe with the lightest touch. I think the key thing is we've used a lot of brute force to keep people safe. We have to really now figure out how to do it with the lightest touch. I think there's consensus around that there's a very small number of people who drive gun violence there needs to be a very, very strong response. But that traditionally that response has been too broad, and we're not as we haven't been as laser focused as we need to be. But I think it is definitely true. I think it's actually a crime prevention strategy that if you're repeatedly involved in gun violence, that you're going to face, you can be certain, swift, certain, fair, you're going to face severe consequences if you're repeatedly involved in gun violence. But then what do you do? And you have to be creative and imaginative and have the lightest touch possible for the 99% that aren't that. Right. So I think more and more, that's what people. I think that's that. I think the biggest innovation, in some sense, was what happened with CompStat. Was once people believed that crime was not inevitable. Back when we remember there were 2,200 murders, and people thought that it's an ungovernable city and crime is just. But once you actually hold yourself up and say that you think you can reduce crime, which is just one way of measuring safety, it really puts pressure on people to be creative, to take the best ideas, whether it's here, Philadelphia, or Boston, or anywhere else in the country or the world, to be wide open about the best strategies.
When I guess as a final question, what should we in the media be focused on? I've just noticed this over the 40 years I've been in this business, is that there'll be something like a gang takedown, incredible visuals. You visit you get your man on the street interview. Hey, these kids were wrecking havoc, and it's about time somebody did something. And the DA, and they show all of the guns, and everybody gets arrested, and who knows what happens later. Perhaps we do a follow-up, perhaps we don't. Where should we be focusing? Instead of taking sort of the easy story like that, which is about sort of top-down, forceful policing of violence, how do we sort of tell a different story, more oriented toward prevention?
I think one lens should always be, how are you keeping people safe with the lightest touch? And so that should apply to everything that we do in criminal justice. Should be when somebody is arrested, I think it starts with, should that be a crime in the first place? Would a warning sign be that, or should it be civil enforcement? Should it be a civil penalty? But we should not, I believe the government shouldn't use a drop more force than necessary to keep people safe. The government must as necessary, and that continues on. That person is sitting in Rikers Island. I think we should say, what's the public safety value of every single person in Rikers Island, and for how long? Why do they need to be? For people who go to state prison, for everything that we do. I think that we should all be held accountable also, and that you can do this to the media and say, what is the evidence that that's an effective strategy? Not just for law enforcement. And then I finally say, I think that there needs to be transparent. I think everything that we do in criminal justice should be transparent. I think the police department is the most transparent agency in the world, or certainly in America, in the sense of this. Everything that they do, there's body-worn cameras, so whatever everything that they do, they get disciplined. It's on. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm saying there's a lot, that the more sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. I think that what we should do is have everything that we do in criminal justice it should be transparent. You should be able to look at it and ask with ideological agnosticism, is this effective or is it not effective across the board for prosecutors, for police, for all our partners, for the courts. That's, I think, important.
Okay. I'm going to have you join our lawsuit against the NYPD. We've been trying to get access to body-worn camera footage. But we'll take that up another time. You're a pretty good lawyer from what I hear. So, listen, please join me in thanking Chauncey Parker. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.